Hello, everyone. This is MC Deck Discussions, and I'm Abby Small. And today we have another deck discussion. Before I get started here, I do recommend watching Web Warrior Fanatic's review of Falcon because he goes into the details of all the cards. And I'm not going to be going into the details of all of the cards. There'll be some cards because they're essential to this particular build, but I just want to mention that that's a great review to watch so that you can get the details of any of the cards. I won't be spending a lot of time on those cards so that this video doesn't run too long. So that's his cards in particular. So we're going to focus in on the cards that I've added instead. Okay, so with this build, by the way, so I played 9 games with it in the playtesting. So I went up against Claw, Eunice, who actually I was going to rotate out of my playtesting villains, but decided I needed to keep him in. I'll describe why in a little bit. Ensab and Nur, which is a version of Apocalypse, and Magneto. So the reason I kept Eunice in is because I was playing with Claw, and I had actually just recently watched Web Warrior Fanatic's review of Falcon, and I realized what he said was true, that Falcon has some challenges. And my original build, I was going for a build that was really, really aerial emphasized, which this one still is. It has 18 aerial cards in it. But I didn't have Professor X in it, and I didn't have Nick Fury in it. And I was going for a little something different. You know, I tend to like those to be included. And it was working really well against Claw on Standard. But once I hit Expert, it was pretty clear that wasn't going to work. When I played on Standard, I just got exactly the right order of draws so that it worked really well, focused around Cannonball, which I'll describe in a little bit. But then realized I really need to make some major changes. So if you look here at my deck refinements, you'll see I removed a bunch of cards, made a bunch of other additions. There were probably some other changes too. Those were the ones that I remembered at the time. But those changes worked incredibly well. So after I lost in my first battle against Expert Claw, I then went undefeated after that. So I played Expert Claw again, and then played against all the rest. So I left Eunice in because I wanted to make sure that Falcon could, in fact, handle Eunice, and especially on Expert Eunice, and take care of all of that thwarting, all that threat that needs to be handled. And it did it very well, and handled all of these villains quite well, actually. So I was very happy with the way the deck ended up. So with that in mind, let's get started. So I am going to go ahead and start with the allies because Cannonball is a huge factor in here. So let's go with Cannonball first. So Cannonball is a 3-cost basic ally, has 2 thwart and 2 attack, and 2 health, and has this interrupt. Oh, and is aerial and X-Force traded. Has this interrupt: when Cannonball would take any amount of consequential damage, reduce that amount by X, where X is the number of aerial cards in your hand. So that's why it's essential we have a lot of aerial cards in our hand. And like I said, there are 18 in this deck altogether. And as you begin to get some of your kit set out with some of your supports and some of the upgrades, then that makes it even more likely to get aerial cards out, although some of them get depleted as well because some of them are allies. So of the allies, we have 9 allies in here. Only 2 of them are not aerial, so only Nick Fury and Professor X. The rest are all aerial cards. So what that means is that once I get Cannonball out, my expectation is that he will have I will have 2 aerial cards in hand, basically at all times, so that he can end up attacking or thwarting for free. At first, with 2 each, which is pretty decent, but that gets enhanced as the deck gets built out. And also, it turns out that sometimes I would have maybe just 1, so maybe he'd take a damage here and there, but I didn't generally want him to take damage at all. And that actually is a part of what Nick Fury's for. So while Nick Fury is just an awesome card in general, because of this drawing 3 cards, which also helps to, set up your supports and upgrades and helps to get out other allies. But the other responsibility for Nick Fury is when you don't have enough aerial cards in hand, you can play Nick Fury, get more cards in hand. And if you didn't have aerial cards in hand to begin with, you're going to have aerial cards in hand after you play Nick Fury. So he served as extra insurance to make sure that Cannonball is going to have the cards he needs. And the way we made sure of that was we put 3 copies of Make the Call in the deck so that Nick Fury could come back repeatedly as needed, and periodically getting Professor X back so that we could go to alter ego form when we needed to. So the deck is really built very much around Cannonball coming out and getting that consistent attack and thwart, right? So let's go over some of the other allies that are also key that help to enhance that attacking and thwarting for not just him, but all aerial characters, including Falcon, right? So let's look at Falcon real fast, right? He has 2 attack and 2 thwart and 2 defense, hand size of 10, hit points of 10, hand size of 5 on his hero side, which is what this side is. And during the player phase, you play with the top card of the encounter deck face up. So whenever he's in hero form, that's the case. And he has this eagle-eyed ability with this response. After you play an aerial card, discard the top card of the encounter deck, right? So that lets you manipulate that top card so that you can get the most benefit from either the cards you're playing or when you're setting up the villain, right? So there are times when perhaps you want a card to stay on top of the deck because you can see that, oh, hey, this isn't going to do any damage. Or maybe it will do a lot of damage and you don't care because Nick Fury or Professor X are going to take that card and take that attack in the face, right? So that's going to matter. I'll mention that when we get to the events, why we care about having them take big attacks to the face. All right, so let's look at those key characters that help to enhance Cannonball and Falcon's attack and thwarting, right? So that would be Arrow, right? So for Arrow, you have is Ariel an agent of Atlas traded, 1 attack and 1 thwart, which we don't generally care about too much, has a health of 3. Here's what we really care about is the hero action, exhaust Arrow, choose a player until the end of the phase. Each aerial character that player controls gets +1 ATK. So the idea is to get Ariel out, maybe periodically attack or thwart, maybe attack once in a while, get a tough off of an enemy, maybe thwart once in a while. But generally speaking, what you're going to do is use this hero action and give everybody else +1 ATK. And then same goes, or in a similar manner, is for Cloud9, right? So 3-cost ally, 1 attack, 1 thwart, 1 attack. So very similar to Arrow, but has has almost an identical ability, but for thwarting. So exhaust Cloud9, choose a player until the end of the phase. Each aerial character that player controls gets +1 thwart, right? So those are 2 other key cards that you want to have out, one or the other a lot of times. But when you have both, you tend to be pretty happy about it. And then the other allies also serve great purposes when they do come out. So you have Adam Warlock, right, who is 3-cost, 1 thwart, and 1 attack, and is Aerial and Mystic traded, and has this response: after Adam Warlock attacks or thwarts, discard 1 card from your hand. If that card's printed cost is a physical, remove 3 threat from a scheme. Is an energy, heal 3 damage from your identity. Is a mental, deal 3 damage to an enemy. Or is a wild, choose one of the above. And typically you're going to use this ability after you've already played most of your cards so that you have a really good idea of which of these you're going to get so you can get what you want, right? So his ability tends to be highly effective. And so he's a great card to get out there, and then you can use him once or twice and then go ahead and defend with him, right? Hopefully most of the time you actually want to use him at least twice before defending with him. And then Pixie's main purpose is to bring back Professor X, but also to supply another aerial traded character and X-Men traded character. We care about these extra traits because of another card in our deck that we'll go over later. And then the other would include Sunspot, right? So Sunspot, 3-cost ally, 1 thwart, and 2 attack. Aerial and X-Force traded, and has this response: after you play Sunspot from your hand, choose a player, deal 1 damage to the villain and each minion engaged with the chosen player for each energy resource used to pay for Sunspot. So typically that would be a minimum of 1 in this deck, but typically 2 or 3 every single time you play them. So doing 2 or 3 damage to every enemy you're engaged with, then, or well, in this case, because I'm solo, right? If you're playing multiplayer, you could choose a different player. But in solo, then, you're going to deal 1 damage to the villain and every minion that, 1 to 3 damage, basically, really, every time that you play Sunspot. So Sunspot ends up being highly effective as well. And then last but not least, Red Wing. So Red Wing is a character with Aerial, Avenger, and Bird traits, and has this hero action. And this is his identity-specific minion. And he has this hero action, Exhaust Red Wing, return him to your hand, discard the top card of the encounter deck, which you can see, right, because of Falcon's ability. Choose to either deal X damage to an enemy or remove X threat from a scheme. X is the number of icons in the discarded card's boost area. So this one was surprisingly effective to me and in particular situations. So let's go ahead and get into what some of those situations are now. So because we have, let's go ahead. So the main thing is Red Wing is highly effective if you have some of your double resources in hand, right? So in this deck, we have the Energy, Genius, and Strength double resources, but also Power of Flight, which doubles the number of resources this card generates while paying for an aerial card. And like I said, we have 18 aerial cards in our deck. So this comes into use highly frequently. Some of our one-cost aerial cards, but still there are tons of targets for this. So when you have maybe a couple of these in your hand, and you also have out, right? So let's get into, because also why Sunspot always has available. So the Power of Flight, this doubles the number of resources this card generates while paying for an aerial card. It has an energy resource, right? And that's the type of resource that Sunspot also needed. So that can give you 2 of those resources for Sunspot. And then the other one that gives you the 3rd resource for Sunspot and any other aerial card is his support, Falcon's Flock, right? So it has the Aerial and Bird trait, costs 2. And this deck card, typically I would play at least 2 times a game. And it has 5 uses. So you put 5 bird counters on it when you play it. And is a resource. Notice it is a resource. It's not just a hero resource, so you can play on either side. Remove 1 bird counter from here. Generate an energy resource for an aerial card. Limit once per card. So you can only use it once on each card, but since you end up having multiple aerial cards in your hand most of the time, you end up being able to use 2 or perhaps 3 of these in a turn. So first of all, it generates an energy resource, so that also contributes to Sunspot's ability. But when we have Red Wing in play, and you also have maybe 1 or 2 of these resource cards, and then you also have Falcon's Flock out, you have the ability to put Red Wing into play and take him back and go back and forth with that. And if you have the right cards on the encounter deck, you could end up doing 2 plus 2 plus 3. If you play him 2 or 3 times, you can do a lot of damage or thwarting with Red Wing. So I found that to be a surprise part of this deck. I wasn't expecting to enjoy that part of the deck so much, but there are a lot of times where all I wanted to do with Red Wing was bring him in, maybe attack for 1 or thwart for 1, and then the next turn, bring him back into my hand. But when the opportunity presented itself, then taking advantage of these resources could make Red Wing highly effective. And a lot of times in my final attack that I would do against the villain, I would end up having Red Wing set up to do that kind of thing. All right. So with that in mind, let's move on to the other important cards of this deck. We already started talking about supports with Falcon's Flock. So we also have Flight Squadron, another key card. So this card is a little bit like that card for the X-Men, Utopia. So Utopia is a card for the X-Men where when you play an X-Men ally, then you're able to ready another X-Men character. So, but this is a little different, easier to trigger, but it does only apply to allies. So let's go ahead and take a look at Flight Squadron. It's a 2-cost support, right? And you play only if your enemy has the aerial trait, which obviously Falcon has that on his hero side. Max 1 team card per player, so it is a team card. If each of your allies has the aerial trait, increase your ally limit by 1, and this card gains this response. After you play an aerial card, exhaust this card. Then you can ready an ally you control. So there are lots of aerial cards in here, so this gets triggered a lot. Now you do have to be careful about the timing because you end up with Nick Fury out or Professor X. And some of you might be wondering perhaps why I don't have another card in here that allows you to have a fourth ally, an extra ally out on top of Flight Squadron. And the reason is because I want to be able to get Nick Fury or Professor X out when I'm going to play an aerial card. So if I have Nick Fury or Professor X out and I want to be able to use Flight Squadron's ability, then I would play, say, another ally, and then that ally would replace, right? Because at first you can only have 3 allies, and so this would be where I'm going to suppose we have 3 allies now, and one of them is Nick Fury or Professor X. Then when you play another aerial ally, it will replace Nick Fury or Professor X. Then you will meet this requirement that all your allies are aerial, and you'll be able to trigger this response that after you play an aerial card, exhaust this card and ready an ally you control. And so you will very often then want to ready perhaps Cannonball to use him again, which we'll talk about the other enhancements for Cannonball in a little bit. Which we already did some. But sometimes what you actually want to do is ready Cloud9 or Arrow, because then you can use their ability again and then give another, say, +1 attack or +1 thwart. So then their ability gives +2 to all aerial characters instead of just +1. And periodically you could even get +3. That didn't happen very often, maybe 1 or 2 games. Because of one of these upgrades. So why don't I mention that upgrade now while I'm thinking of it? Yes, and that would be Talon line, right? So is a 2-cost upgrade. It has this hero response after you resolve Falcon's eagle-eyed ability, discard Talon line, and for each icon in the discarded card's boost area, choose one. You can ready a character you control or stun an enemy. So this gives you a chance to, you would typically already want to have this out and not use it in the same turn necessarily. And then that way you can use this card's ability for maximum effectiveness for perhaps readying Cloud9 or Eero a second or even third time if you already have Flight Squadron out, and then truly maximizing what they use. So a person could actually focus on getting that set up regularly, although I didn't. I typically had more important cards to get out most of the time. But if you were looking for big burst damage at the end of a game, that is what can actually help to provide that. Because you do have to discard it, so that's why you'd want it to be a setup, right? So you have to discard Talon line in order to use it. All right, going back to the other supports, we also have Soup Kitchen, which I'm not going to really mention here. It certainly has its uses, but then Team Building Exercise, right? So since we have so many aerial cards, Team Building Exercise ends up being highly effective. I actually originally had Quinn Carrier instead, but I found I just wasn't playing it, didn't find the need for it between Falcons Flock and Team Building Exercise, and it just really slowed things down for the setup and for the pacing of play. So this was plenty effective, especially when combined with our double resources that we have here. All right, so now let's get to some of these upgrades that help with Cannonball, right? So we have Inspired in the deck. This is meant to go on Cannonball. I never played it in all those 9 games. I never played it on anybody else. So you attached ally gets +1 thwart and +1 attack. So now he's attacking for 3 and has 3 attack and 3 thwart every time. But we also had Soaring Acrobatics in here. So you just pay for it once. And play under any player's control, max 1 per player. Has this hero interrupt. When an aerial character you control uses a basic power, exhaust Soaring Acrobatics, that character gets +1 to that power for this use. So you would use this on whoever it makes sense to use it for. So I might use it for Falcon a lot of the time. Most of the time I did find I was using it for Cannonball. But here's the cool thing. So Soaring Acrobatics is a card that once you play it, it stays out. Inspired normally isn't, but in this deck, Inspired, it acts as a permanent upgrade because Cannonball is meant to stay in the game the whole time. So that ends up being pretty cool without having to heal him, right? It just happens in the deck naturally, as long as you have those aerial cards in your hand. All right, so that's it for the upgrades, and that leaves our events. So which are not, which are still very important. I already mentioned Make the Call earlier. Face the Past is important in this deck. I didn't actually have it in the deck to begin with. If we take a look at Falcon's minion, his particular minion, let's go ahead and look at that. All right, so I went to the Hall of Heroes website so you can see the actual image here. So Viper is it's his Falcon Nemesis minion, and he has 2 scheme and 2 attack with quick strike and this forced response. After Viper activates, discard the top 5 cards of the encounter deck. So he can be actually really devastating when you combine this. So, certainly that's not awesome to discard top 5 cards of your encounter deck, no matter what. However, when he also has his side scheme out, this becomes less than fun a lot of the time. And here's why. So if we look at Serpent Solutions, it has this forced response. After a Serpent Society minion is discarded from the top of the encounter deck, deal that minion to the first player as a face-down encounter card. So first of all, Viper is a Serpent Society card. So that could happen later on. It's not going to happen this time. But he does have quick strike, right? So he's going to attack as soon as he comes out. But in addition to that, there are 2 of these Serpent Soldiers, and they are Serpent Society cards, and they also have quick strike. So if you end up discarding one of these, and especially if you've gone through a lot of the encounter deck, this is highly likely, then you end up getting another 2 points of damage at you right away. So it's nicer to have control over when Viper comes out. So that's why Face the Past is such a great card in this deck. In addition, I actually hadn't realized one of the ways that you could use Face the Past. So if you can actually defend this attack so it doesn't do any damage. He'll still do his forced response, but now you're not worried about any Serpent Society cards coming out and triggering Serpent Solutions. But you can actually defend this. It never occurred to me until playing against Viper in particular, with Falcon, that I could do this. So let's take a look at Face the Past again. All right, so Face the Past, 0 cost event, and it's max 1 per deck, has this hero action. Search the encounter deck discard pile and set aside area for your Nemesis minion and reveal it. Notice that comes first. So once you reveal it, he comes out into play and quick strike has its effect immediately. So as soon as he attacks, you defend. Now, if I'm playing this wrong, somebody please point it out. But it seems to me that occurs first because he's been revealed. So his quick strike comes into effect. So then you defend with Falcon. Then you can ready your hero and draw 3 cards. So now he defends. He has a defense of 2. He takes no damage. Now he's readied, and he's able to tackle Viper. Now you cannot attack the villain this phase, but that wouldn't be the goal here. The goal is to get more cards out, get your setup done, and remove Viper. And we have plenty of ability to do so between Falcon's attack of 2, the allies. Falcon can enhance his attack, by the way, so I will mention one of his cards here, which is Battlefield Awareness, a 2-cost upgrade. It has the aerial and skill traits. Has this hero interrupt when Falcon uses a basic power, exhaust Battlefield Awareness, and discard the top card of the encounter deck. Again, you already know what's on the top of the deck. Falcon gets +1 to that power for this use for each of these icons in the discarded cards boost area. So that can enhance his own attacks, or thwarts, of course, but in this case, I'm talking about going up against Viper, and then one of the allies can finish him off. But you also have other cards that can help with that as well. So we're going to finish this off with these events other than Face the Past. So we have 2 copies of Air Supremacy and 2 copies of Strength and Diversity, both cool cards in this deck. So first of all, Air Supremacy, right? 2-cost event, aerial and attack traits. Has this hero action, choose up to X enemies, where X is equal to the number of aerial characters you control. Deal 3 damage to each chosen enemy. So if you happen to have this in hand while you have Viper out, you can deal 3 damage to Viper and to the villain and possibly some other cards. Of course, it depends on how many aerial characters you have out, but typically have at least 2 out. But often 3, at least 2, right? If you have 1 ally and you have your hero, Falcon, that's at least 2 already. But the other cool thing about this card, in addition to the other card that I'm about to show you, is that this is not an attack. So this is, it's as if you're attacking from the sky, right? So bombarding people, right? So you don't, if anybody has retaliate, you don't have to worry about that. Great way to get off toughs as well, although it kind of a waste of 3 damage, but sometimes, that's what you end up using it for too. So a great card. And then another awesome card in this deck, one that was a surprise. I did not have this in my deck to begin with, and then this was part of the revamping, so 2 copies of this. It's an alliance card, but you don't care about this when you're playing solo, at least. And so it's a 2-cost card then, 2 cost per player. Hero action: for each different trait on friendly characters in play, choose. Remove 1 threat from a scheme, deal 1 damage to an enemy. So at the bare minimum, if all you have out is Falcon, which I never once played this with just Falcon out, Falcon has 2 traits, Aerial and Avenger. But as soon as you get out another one of your cards, then you have other traits out. And the allies here, the Aerial allies, have a huge variety, right? So Adam Warlock, Aerial, and Mystic, that adds another trait. Aerial and Agent of Atlas, there's another trait. Cannonball, Aerial and X-Force, there's a 3rd trait. Cloud9, Aerial and Champion, right? There's a 4th possibility. We have, if Nick Fury is out, you have Shield and Spy, right? A couple new, those are both new ones. Pixie has Aerial and X-Men. That would be Professor X has Psionic and X-Men. And Red Wing has, Bird would be the new addition there, because he was Aerial and Avenger, so Bird would be the new addition. And then Sunspot, Aerial, and X-Force, which we saw another X-Force, but still, this is a huge variety. So when I played this card, typically I would have, most of the time, I had 5 different traits out. Here and there, I would have 6 different traits out. And so that's a 2 for 5 or 6, which is very powerful, considering that it's not an attack or a thwart, and you have this flexibility. Each trait, you get to make this choice. So you pick a trait, remove 1 threat from a scheme. Pick another trait, deal a damage. So you can go back and forth between schemes, multiple schemes, plinking off a tough status here and there, or pile it all on for 1 big attack of 5 or 6, or 1 big thwart. So this ended up being a huge card. The only thing is it's not an aerial card, so it didn't contribute to that. That's why I kept it at a minimum of just 2. And plus, you need to have allies out to get some real effectiveness from it. But it was an all-star card in this deck. Really awesome card. So all in all, I highly recommend giving this deck a try. Nick Fury and Professor X really are what help to give it consistency, allow, Professor X allowing you to go down to your alter ego side more regularly, Nick Fury allowing you to consistently have aerial cards in your hand and also help you get your important supports or upgrades out. But overall, it is more of a thematic aerial deck. But once it was rounded out, very powerful deck and very controlled. It doesn't have that big burst damage most of the time that a lot of the control decks have. It actually acts a lot of times as kind of a tempo deck, but you do have a fair amount of setup. So there, it isn't really a tempo deck, but you can start to do very consistent damage to the villain as you're going and end up just taking control, getting plenty of allies out there to defend, to help. There was one more card I wanted to mention. So a lot of times when you're defending, there is an important card that you're going to want to play in the events, and that is his own card, Up, and Away. So 0-cost event, aerial and defense traits, has this hero response, and it's a defense card. After an attacking enemy is given a face-down boost card. So you can be defending with one of your allies, or you might defend with well, you don't have to be defending at all. It's a defense card. But you might be defending with Falcon, and there are reasons why you might defend with him, which I should probably mention real quickly, right? Vibranium Microweave can really help with that, right? With the +1 defense and prevent 1 damage. You can exhaust this card, prevent 1 damage, and deal 1 damage to an enemy. So that's a really great card. But also a Battlefield Awareness can help you with your defense. And there was one more card, and Draw Their Fire, right? So it has this hero response. After the villain phase begins, discard Draw Their Fire. It's just a 1-cost upgrade. Falcon does not exhaust to defend until the end of the phase. So when you have this card out, that's a really good reason to defend with Falcon instead. But most of the time, I was defending with an ally when I would play up, and away, and has this hero response. After an attacking enemy is given a face down boost card, which you already know what that card is because you knew what that card was during your hero turn, or at least the vast majority of the time you do. So when it's given a face down boost card, look at that card and the top card of the encounter deck. You may swap those cards and then draw 1 card for each printed icon on it. So you can control how much damage the card is doing. Most of the time, if you're defending with an ally, you don't care how much damage it's doing. What you care is maxing out these so that you can get lots of card draw. But it also controls, so when you use this card, sometimes you don't necessarily want to maximize card draw because you get to see the card that's your face down boost card and the next card. And other than when you're facing Claw, that next card is going to be the card that you flip up to play as an encounter card. So you may want to strategize what that card is that you're going to flip up. So I'm glad I remembered this at the end. Up, and away is an awesome card for giving you a lot of control, possible decent amount of card draw, but also control what the next encounter card is going to be that's going to come out. But also how much defense, Falcon can control how much defense he's going to need as well by doing that. All right, so that's it for the deck. If you enjoy this kind of content, be sure to like and subscribe and also comment. I love having conversations with people in the comment section. All right, have a great one, everybody.